It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford said that. Who's Henry Ford? He was a rich guy. All right? Let's look him up real quick. American industrialist and business magnate. He founded the Ford Motor Company. You see his name everywhere. Every time you go out, you see a Ford car, dude. This guy was fucking rich. He's old. He knew how the money system worked, and he believed that if people knew how money worked, there would be a revolution, not tomorrow, not 2 weeks from now, tonight. So let's explain to you guys how money works. All right? Let's start it off simple, man. I wrote this essay long time ago. It's got a slideshow to it. I'm going to be showing you guys today. All right? Let's start with the basics. Most people's lives are dedicated to making money. We go to school. We go to a university to learn the skills to get a good job, where we're trading valuable hours of our lives so we can make some good money. But because money is the means to get the things that we need to survive in this world, such as food, a secure home, education, etc., it naturally becomes a lot of our number one priorities. However, most of us don't understand where it comes from, how it works, and how it affects you and your life. So let me share with you some things that you should know. One, let's just go back that hundreds of thousands of years ago, you know what people's number one priority was? Having food, having a place to live, and getting like an education. Like before we had currency, it changed. Because now currency is the means to getting all that stuff. So it becomes our number one priorities. Ever think about, you got a birthday going on. So many people can't make it because they're working, because they're making money. You got anything going on, people don't see each other as much. Families don't come together as much because everybody's working to get some money. So, that's just something that we should address first. Our number one priority becomes money. And our money does not come from the government. What? Are you saying that the dollar bills, they don't come from the government? Nope. Money is a psychological abstraction, and that might be two big words for you guys, but I got ChatGPT to kind of dumb it down for everybody. And even for me, I was trying to think about how to explain what a psychological abstraction was, and I couldn't think of it. But money is a psychological abstraction because its value is largely based on our collective belief and trust in its worth. Let's break it down. Intrinsic value. Unlike essential resources like food or water, money doesn't have inherent value. You can't eat or drink it. You can't use it for shelter. Its value is assigned by society and agreed upon through a system. Symbolic representation. Money is a symbol that represents value. A $100 bill is just a piece of paper, but we believe it's worth $100 because we've collectively agreed upon this symbolic representation. So we agree upon its worth. Our perception of money can influence our behavior. For example, receiving a $100 bill might make us feel wealthier and more inclined to spend. It doesn't have any intrinsic value itself. We agree. So an official government edict is not necessary to create money. So literally anything could serve as money as long as, one, people are willing to accept it as a medium of exchange. Two, it maintains a reasonable purchasing power over time. And three, it can serve as a convenient unit of measure. Here's some background knowledge, because maybe we should figure out, okay, how did we get to this place to where we have pieces of paper as money? Well, in 1694, England had just gone through 50 years of war. Imagine that. 50 years. It's like over half of somebody's life. But anyways, financially drained, the English government needed to borrow money to fund its political activities. So some guy, William Paterson, said a privately owned bank that would loan the government money created out of thin air is the solution. That's his fucking words. Paterson proposed a loan of $1.2 million to the English government, which equates to around $36 billion today. In return, his bank would receive the privilege of issuing money notes. The English government endorsed this idea, and that's how the very first private central bank was born. Central banking is important for people to know about, because if people don't know about it, they're just going to take over. It's similar to the concept of, if you're not going to be responsible for yourself, you will end up being responsible for somebody else, for a tyrant. If you're not telling yourself what to do, someone will tell you what to do. All right? Central banking is more influential than laws, governments, and politicians. That's important. Central banking, the people that create the money, more influential than laws, government, and politicians. A central bank is essentially the entity that manages a nation's money supply and could loan money to the government with interest. Those two words, with interest, are important, and you'll understand later. The United States has a central bank of its own called the Federal Reserve, and despite being called the Federal Reserve, it's not a government agency. It's a privately owned banking business. And the six men, these six guys right here, Frank Vanderklipp, Paul Warburg, Henry Davison, names that you've probably never heard in your life. The six men who created the Federal Reserve made up 25% of the world's wealth. 25%. That's a quarter of the pie. If the world only had $1, they had 25 cents. And everybody else, the other 75%, was divided amongst billions of people. They told the world that its purpose was to stabilize the economy and to stop the grip of Wall Street banks over America. But the same guys that started it were the same guys that said they were going to stop it. If they succeeded, it would give a small group of men the power to create money out of nothing and loan it to the American government, again, with interest. They kept it a secret because the American people at the time actually knew what central banks were and did not want them. Most people today, you tell them, hey, tell me what a central bank is, they're not going to be able to tell you. People during the time, they knew what it was. So the people that were trying to create it, they had to keep it a secret. All right. Everywhere a central bank went, there would be wealth inequality, wild swings of economic booms and falls. And every time it fell, those at the top of the economy would somehow get richer while everyone else got poorer. Sound familiar? When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they, and not the leaders of the government, control the situation. Napoleon said that. He also said some other stuff after it, but that's not important. Just know that since the hand that feeds is above the hand that takes, okay? They have leverage over the government, which means they have influence over the government, who has influence over us. So they're at the top of the pyramid, okay? Central banks. Essentially, the Federal Reserve is a central bank with a government-granted monopoly on the creation of money and credit. The Fed literally loans money into existence. The Federal Reserve notes are paper promises backed by nothing of intrinsic value, and they are only functioning as money because the government forces them on the public through legal tender laws. To put it simply, the Fed is a group of banks running a national counterfeiting operation with the protection of our government. US dollars used to be backed and exchangeable for gold, something physical that has value. Gold and silver has always maintained its value over time. You see this chart right here? Gold has offset the loss of purchasing power of the US dollar. Look at how much the dollar was worth in 1900s, the beginning of the 1900s, all the way down in 2015, and gold has gone up. You see that? All right. So it used to be exchangeable for gold, but in 1971, the US dollar was failing, and Uncle Sam needed more funding for the Vietnam War. Okay. So President Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard, which made money completely valueless. It's backed by nothing. So now the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. That means all money, not just the US dollar, is backed by nothing other than the trust of the American government. And I'll get to why we shouldn't trust the American government and the corporations that fund the politicians later. But for now, let's just start with when money is backed by nothing, it's called fiat. There's been 152 fiat currencies that have failed due to hyperinflation, which is exactly where the US dollar is heading because the Federal Reserve keeps creating more and more and more money. History shows repeatedly that a devalued fiat currency leads to financial collapse. And look at this chart right here. This is the actual physical cash in the world, the green. All right? Look at all the money created by banks. Just created from thin air. Boom. That's insane. What is this? Is that euros? Over 2,000 billion euros, according to that chart right there. So this is how the Federal Reserve works. When the government needs more money than it receives from taxes, they ask the Treasury deposit for money. And the Treasury receives an IOU bond from the government. An IOU bond is a request for money to be paid back with interest at a later time. And banks purchase this IOU and sell it to the Federal Reserve for a profit. The Federal Reserve then writes a check for this IOU and hands it to the banks, which give the money to the Treasury. Every time the Federal Reserve writes a check, money is created from nothing, withdrawn from an account that doesn't exist, and that money can be used to buy things. If you or I did that, we would be arrested. But they can do it because they invented the system. You could do it. It's a problem when I do it. So now, money has been created and can be used to pay government bills. The government uses this money to employ public workers, fund the military, create social programs, etc. Then the employees, soldiers, and contractors deposit their pay, fiat, into banks, and these banks only hold a fraction of the money their customers deposit as reserves. We were all taught this in school. This is the one thing that they did teach us about in school, is that whatever percent it is, banks only have to keep a certain amount of deposits in the actual bank. That's why you see people when they go into banks to try to withdraw like 200 grand at once. I think Soulja Boy did it once. They didn't have all of his money there for him. And he's like, what the fuck? You know? So if everybody at once took all of their money out of the banks, the world, not the world financial system would crash. Sorry for stuttering, my bad. But all right. Boom, boom, boom. This allows them to use the rest of it to make loans and thereby essentially create new money. Our income, consumption, and wealth is taxed, so the Treasury can pay back the interest in loans they borrow from the Federal Reserve, which created that money out of nothing. The system is designed to require ever-increasing levels of debt and will eventually collapse because the politicians always pass it on to the next generation. They do not want the system to collapse while they are responsible, so they keep printing money out of nothing, which increases inflation for the next fucking politicians to deal with. It's corrupt, man. When more loans are given, the more money is created. The more money that's created, the less the rest of the money in circulation is worth. This is inflation. It's the price we all pay for our government's fraud of borrowing money that's printed. Easy money now in exchange for tax on the future generations. That's instant gratification. We can compare that to our daily lives. You want a goddamn cookie? You want 20 cookies? You can eat 20 cookies and instantly gratify yourself, but you're going to pay for it later. Okay, boom. Not only does this affect the people in our country, but it dilutes the currency supply of all the other nations because their reserves are backed by the US dollar. All reserves are worth less every time money is created. As said before, for the last several years, the Federal Reserve has created trillions of dollars and keeps making more. Boom, we already talked about the government creates glorified Boom. Let's just go through these steps. The bank swap IOUs to create currency. If you want to screenshot this and study this, you can. I'm going to skip past it real quick. Boom, boom. Our money is taxed. Debt ceiling. Boom, boom, boom. All right. The Federal Reserve is the most powerful entity in the United States. The Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. That is the 13th chairman of the Federal Reserve. He said that himself, Alan Greenspan. Look at this motherfucker. Look at that big-ass nose. He looks like he's up to something. He looks like he's taking a mugshot, which he should be. But he said that there's no other agency of government which can overrule the actions that we take as the Federal Reserve, because they are the most powerful agency in America. Our government and the bankers work together intimately, and the government is pretty much a group of people who had the intention to rule a society with enough weapons and people that could together self-sustain, protect land, and claim it as theirs. And because naturally, the people living on that land were willing to labor for the things they need to survive, such as water, food, and a home, they had no choice but to abide by their system, in which now, instead of slavery in exchange for a life, we all willingly exchange our lifetime and labor for their currency that we could use to buy things that they sell to us and that we sell to each other. But you can't sell to each other without Uncle Sam getting his cut. Uncle Sam will always get his cut. You know why prostitution is illegal? Because you can't tax it. Let's not go too deep into that, man. But Uncle Sam always going to get his cut. You know that, man. You skip out on paying taxes, the IRS will come and get you. The banks create the government's money, and the government keeps the banks in business because it has the authority to enforce the law and tax people. So millions of us are forced to work for their own currency and in order to keep safe, you've got to let the bank get a portion of. Not only do we have to work for the money from the banks, but we have to give it back to them so they could keep it safe. That's why we have bank accounts. Boom, boom, boom. Even though it's already being taxed and spent on your survival. Even though. Currently in America, well, let me just say this point. We work for rich and powerful people so we could survive. Currently in America, since money is the means of how we get the things we need to survive, the more of it you have, the more power/influence you have. And if you can create money out of nothing and influence people into agreeing that your currency is what they need to buy everything, you have unlimited power. Not unlimited. That might be an exaggeration, but when it comes to... well, you pretty much do have unlimited power. There is somebody on the south side of Chicago, there's somebody in the suburbs, there's somebody in rural areas that will take $1 million to go have somebody killed for you. We all know that that's a fact. So if you can just get $1 million whenever you want, hello, you have power. People with more, and look at it like this, people with more money tell people with less money what to do and what not to do to get more money. And obviously, what they tell people to do is designed specifically to make them more money than the employee. The bosses are always making more money than the employee. They're like, hey, you want to make some money? Go, I'll give you money to make me even more money. And most of us are conditioned through the public schooling system to be employees or near the bottom of the pyramid. Just look at how it works. Our central bank creates large amounts of money, loans it to the government and corporations to be paid back with interest, never-ending profit. And the government and corporations tell people they could exchange valuable hours to create valuable products and services for worthless fiat, which is valueless currency. If they want food and a place to live, that's what you got to do. And the jobs that they make us do are designed to make them enough money to generate profit and run and make their businesses and services more valuable. Make enough money to be able to pay back the bank plus interest. And on top of that, enough to live their lives and invest in other side businesses and operations. Owning property is valuable, and we get hired to build it. Owning food franchises is valuable, and we get hired to flip burgers. Owning products is valuable, and we get hired to make them and sell them. Most of us will never own any portion of property, franchise, or product that most of us have worked hard to create. We get worthless paper for trading hours of our lives creating long-lasting products, services, and valuables for the owners of companies that will constantly get royalties off of our labor. The monetary system is designed to keep the majority of us distracted consumers wasting money on instant gratification, going to a school that doesn't teach us about how money works, how to spend it, or how to get it, and it conditions us to do what we're told, and drills things into our heads that won't benefit our lives in any significant way. Most of us are busy working, just trying to get enough money to survive comfortably, while trying to maintain a life doing what we want to do. So we never have time to get any real knowledge, or question the people in power, or become someone of power, or fully realize our position in this country, or do anything about any of that. Delving further into public education, which could also be defined as public indoctrination, the first largely funded compulsory education system, which is a period of education that is required of all people and is imposed by the government. It was founded and funded by John D. Rockefeller. You heard that name before, Rockefeller, and Frederick T. Gates, and it shaped our modern-day public education system. From the very start, the goal of the General Education Board was revealed by Frederick T. Gates himself. He stated, "In our dreams, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning." The Education Board, the mission statement was, "We will not turn any of these people's children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply." He's like, we have enough of these people. That's not what we're trying to do. But the task we set before ourselves is to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are. So we will organize our children and teach them to do the things their fathers and mothers are doing in the homes, in the shops, and on the farm. Since the very start, the goal of mandatory public education was to sculpt a non-thinking working class. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. That's what John D. Rockefeller said. Public education is not to spread knowledge. It's to breed a standard citizenry by suppressing dissent and originality. You know it's like that. You've been to public school. You know that it is... I don't have to say it. Therefore, indoctrinating us into a very controlled, formulaic system that feeds off the energy of its laborers. Public education does not encourage critical thinking, nor does it foster imagination. It does not teach emotional intelligence, and it doesn't seek to help nurture an individual's innate skills or abilities, or even teach them skills and abilities. It just gives you repetitive tasks to prepare you to spend $20,000 to $45,000 on average for college, essentially forcing most students to take out a loan in which they'll have to pay interest on for years. Also, you can make an average of $47,000 a year. That's right. The average income for college graduates is under $50,000 a year. The average income for college graduates is under $50,000 a year. 27% less of what most projected their income to be. That sucks. You go to college thinking you're going to make a lot of money. Most people don't. And that's average. Exactly my point. That means more than half of people make under $47,000 a year that went to college. They graduated college, not even just went to college. 35% of graduates describe themselves as working or lower class. That number used to be 20% almost 40 years ago, and it's steadily decreasing. College is a scam, people. Wake up. Most of us aren't wealthy, and the global poverty rate is only sinking further and further. 25% of the population in America is lower class, and the middle class is only getting slimmer. And even people in the middle class, on average, make 5% of what the 1% of the population that owns most of the wealth in America does. And it's the 1% of people who make the decisions and directly affect and determine the paths of our everyday life. People in poverty have a greater chance of being exposed to violence, getting incarcerated, remaining in poverty, and having an almost useless public education. Poor people pay the most for everything because they can't afford to buy things in bulk and still have to pay an absurd amount of taxes, even though, in most cases, poor people have been born into a system that is literally designed to keep them poor, oppressed, and uneducated. Every dollar you make, your boss makes $10. Every time your boss makes $10, his boss makes $1,000. Every time his boss makes $1,000, his boss makes $100,000. And when he made that $100,000, he made the CEO $1 million, and so on. 99% of the American population works to make money for the other 1% of the American population that owns most of the wealth in the country. That's facts. Here's several instances of how the government and rich and powerful people have been caught spending their money.